Good afternoon. At the Atlantic Council, we start right on time. For those of you who signed up online, I am obviously not Fred Kemp, but I am honored to be here. Your name is on the announcement. Anyway, my name is Julia Chang-Block, President of the U.S.-China Education Trust and the Board Director of the Atlantic Council. It is my great pleasure to introduce Liu Minkang, who now goes by Professor Liu. And how lucky are your students at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. But most of us know him as chairman. Most notably, former chairman of China's Everbright Group, former chairman and president of the Bank of China, and the first chairman of the China Banking Regulatory Commission. Professor Liu, we all appreciate your being here with us today. The third plenum of the 18th Party Congress of the Chinese Communist Party on November 12, 2013, unwrapped an ambitious reform agenda, one that has potential to be as momentous as the one launched by Deng Xiaoping in 1978. The agenda encourages the private sector growth and foreign investment, boosting consumption and addressing the buildup of risks in China's financial sector. The social reforms discussed, including loosening the one-child policy, improving the hukou household registration system, and greater land rights for farmers, long overdue, bring China ever closer to the transatlantic values which the United States champion, leading to more freedom, an innovative economy, and more transparent governance. The new round of reforms, which has tantalized the world, if implemented, will have deep implications, not only for the Chinese society, but also for U.S.-China relations. The relationship of our two countries, Professor Liu, and I am saying this at the Atlantic Council, is the most significant geopolitical relationship for this century. There is enormous potential for Sino-US cooperation in fields like energy, technology, finance, and regional, if not global, security. But we have to acknowledge that there are also differences between the two great, or I should say large powers. This new reform agenda provides great opportunities for both the United States and China to promote financial cooperation, collaboration, build trust, and share global responsibilities. With that in mind today, this event could not be more important or timely. Having someone, Professor Liu, with your background, your expertise, to speak on these issues is a gift to our Washington community. And it is an example of the Council's engagement in advancing the debate on the big issues of the day. The Brent Scowcroft Center is only a year and a half old, but its Asia Security Initiative is already making a mark in the field. While the Global Business and Economics Program concentrates, of course, on strengthening the economic integration between Europe and the United States, it is also doing important work on the Asian market. Before I ask Professor Liu to begin his address, I would like to say just a few more words about his distinguished career. As the first chairman of the China Banking Regulatory Commission, CBRC, from March 2003 to October 2011, he was responsible for putting in place an effective regulatory structure which helped the Chinese banking system to weather the global financial crisis and to emerge relatively healthy and well-capitalized. We have a lot to learn from you. Before joining the CBRC, he held high-level positions in banking, financial institutions, the government, so on. Too many for us to mention here. He is currently, after retirement, an academic. He has chosen the scholarly path, like so many mandarins. Can I say that word, mandarins, in China's past? He is currently a research fellow at the Institute of Global Economics and Finance of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and is the honorary dean of the Lingnan College of Sun Yat-sen University in Guangzhou. He is also the Feng Global Institute's first distinguished fellow. And of course, he also sits on numerous international advisory boards. Again, too many to mention here. You can look it up on the web. He has been honored by many awards. Let me just mention two in the interest of time. In 2010, CBRC and Mr. Liu, Professor Liu, personally were jointly named Risk Manager of the Year 2009 by the Global Association of Risk Professionals. In April 2012, he was granted the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Asian Banker magazine. Mr. Liu, thank you again for being here. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Julia, for that introduction. And will kindly remind me of my past, because I think the job I took as the chairman of the Chinese banking regulator was the least thankful job I could get. Actually speaking, being a regulator is the greatest, except assembling poor things. But it's a vivid recollections. Thank you very much for reminding me of that. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so pleased and honored to be here to talk to you. And in next 15 minutes, I will be very brief upon the China's new path forward of the third plenum. I'll give you a very objective views, very quickly going through. The data just came up last night. I got to the first quarter GDP growth in 7.4%. I put estimated 7.3, now it's 7.4%. It's lower than last quarter. Last year is 8%. And vis-a-vis the same quarter the previous year, which is quarter one, that's 7%. So a little bit higher than the first quarter last year, but much lower than the later half of last year. So that is the fluctuations of growth rate. And the PMI, Purchase Managers Index, which shows the confidence for people to invest in the market. And we witnessed a fall to 50.3%, 53 points, and vis-a-vis the January, the first month of this year, which we haven't got to the Spring Festival. It's a full operation at that time at 56, and the last December of last year is 59. It's already 6 or 7 months in decline in running. And PPI is keep declining as well. And the first quarter is minus 2%, but last quarter is at 1.4%. And the first quarter, the previous year, the last year, is 1.7%. So that picture really shows that the CPI is not a case, inflation is not a case in China, and the CPI will have a drag the whole year long. And the current business climate also, we can get to the data. I always rely on that data because that data never tell us lie, because that is the electricity. Nobody can store the electricity. So electricity production growth rate on March is 7.8%, and December is double digit. And if you vis-a-vis the last quarter last year, we have a 15% drop from the last quarter last year. So this is something to show the production is slowing down a little bit. And the BDI is a Baltic Dry Index, which shows general cargo. Transportation worldwide is fell to 1,000 or something a few days ago. And when I left to China, I collected the data. And after the temporary rise in late year 2013, so it dropped like this. This is the world trend of the world trade, because 80% of world trade are transported in general cargo vessels. And China's market share is around 60% of that. So it's a vivid picture of the trade and internationally. So to sum up, the current situation is the optimism still remains, mainly driven by the expectation and the substantive plans for the significant reforms carried out in China. Despite the optimism, concerns still remain. The top challenges are rising labor costs. Every year, the Chinese labor costs is rising roughly 10%. And the compounded rate in the last 5 or 6 years is already reaching 80% rise. And inconsistent regulatory interpretations from different agencies of the government, the overlaps of homework they're doing, and the shortage of skilled labor both on the blue-collar areas and the white-collar areas. And as well as the imbalanced ecosystem, still China is suffering from the smoggy weather. And Chinese government now they try its best to get ready for possible shocks. Externally, it's the side effects upon the newly emerging markets coming from the possible continuous QE tapering off in this country, and the possible reverse operation the latter half of next year. So we are fully aware of that risks upon the newly emerging markets like China. So we show our more flexibility in the foreign exchange rate regime. The daily RMB just announced the trading band expands from 1% to 2% last month. And the liberalization of all interest rates in China will happen in 1 or 2 years. And quicken the pace to build up an innovative ecosystem. The ecosystem is very important for innovation. So ensure that any inventors and investors in China, Chinese or foreign, have access not only to the world's fastest growing market like China, but also to the markets out worldwide with the policy of going broad over there. The reason why I still use the fastest growing market words in China, because China still is the global fastest growing market. I think tomorrow, you can test my words. Tomorrow, the country behind China is still China. If you look at Asia, nobody is ready to get to 7% or 7.5% annual growth in the next 10 years. India is not ready. And high deposit reserve ratio in US, we call the RRR, the rate of reserve ratio, kept by the central bank, gives the Chinese central bank enough room to maneuver for possible monetary easing if necessary. And also we have still abundant and sustainable private savings. Chinese lifestyle is still very frugal, and they still pull the money into the banks they're trusting. And the high foreign exchange reserve, $3 to $4 trillion US, and the further financial reforms. We boldly carry on the financial reforms and just announced the fungible markets with A share in Shanghai and the H shares in Hong Kong, help to stabilize the financial markets. And in line with the deposit insurance scheme, very quickly, maybe this year, we can witness it happens. And also the bankruptcy laws of financial institutions will be on the way forward. And also, we can see some potential growth engines, many from the reforms. And Premier Li Keqiang mentioned that there are more than 400 items of the approval requirements from government have been abolished last year or relaxed. He mentioned in his government report this year, over 200 plus items will be further examined and lifted this year. So plus together, there are 700 items. Then people will automatically ask, how many items of the requirements at all? Roughly is 1,600. So, but anyway, this is the first of its time, first of its kind in history. We got 700 items dropped. And also, people are re-examining the justifiability of all the rules, laws, and fiscal credit, the foreign exchange policies. A lot of things are historical legacies left by 30 years ago, just opening the door, and even something very ridiculous they left in the 50s, aimed at incentivize or decentivizing certain industries and localities, which they are distorting our market mechanism. Once I identify those things, I think immediately we will take actions. And all the reforms are expected to be phased in 2 years, at longest 3 years, starting from this year. And a transparent negative list approach will be widely used, and helping the market to determine the resources allocation. First of its kind in history, Chinese government used this word, decisive role. It's not the government, but decisive roles we hand over to the market. And consensus already reached for the ownership and property rights protection of the private sector. And we introduced the mixed ownership to welcome the private sector and foreign investors to move into the SOEs, along with other approaches to transform the SOEs in a huge way, to create an innovative ecosystem that grants sufficient and equal protection to both domestically owned firms and foreign firms. That means that in the future, we will import a lot of technologists and talents, regardless of the country of origin. And if China's Shanghai pilot free trade zone runs successfully this year, next year, the practice over there will be quickly copied by other parts of the country. And also, a transparent fiscal regime will be carried out. And it's a huge debate nowadays in China to do a lot of things. The to-do list on the fiscal and taxation reform is very long. And I think it's very good for the people to move in the market economy. And it's a must. Because some things like division of the jobs between the central government and the localities are with us for a good 20 years. You can't imagine in any other countries a policy carried out for a good 20 years are still useful and widely applicable. So we got to find out something to repress that. And also, we will pay more attention to prevent any systemic and regional financial crisis by getting something right, like Basel III, Solvency II implementation. For example, we enhanced the shadow banking supervisions from both ends, from the formal traditional banking side and those non-banking financial institutions. And also the reforms is on the way. And also we have the practice of rigid responsibility repayment and zero default rules is being broken. I'm very happy to see that we have a few default cases happened this year, this month, and the last month. Okay, and so there is no convoy systems in the future, and there's no moral hazard. Prudent treatment towards mobile internet financing is carrying on, and created a government sanction body to collect their supply credit standing and financial standing information. And in the future, China will learn from US to have a credit bureau-like firms to offer more data to the markets to serve the financials in the markets. Urbanization must be people-oriented, not just for the purpose to set up more cities. And the political and social agenda in general, I will quickly go through this. Chinese government realized recently that we got to balance the decisiveness and credibility. In the past years, Chinese put a lot of stress about the decisiveness, okay? But nowadays, they think we got to deliver the credibility in line with decisiveness. And also, the government promised to wage a war against the corruption and the crony system, and the guard against those vested interest group. I think it's very successful for the time being. So far, so good. We can see that almost half of the investigations initiated by the public, by whistleblowing by the public, and not by the government and the party proper. And also, we have 31 corruption cases involved the ministerial level officials, and the 20 were disclosed. And a lot of people who got the violation of the discipline is 183,000 last year have been punished seriously. That's 40,000 more than the year before. And also, we are promoting the solidarity of the whole country. And though we have some upsets and hiccups coming from Xinjiang or elsewhere, we never target the religious groups or minorities. and their interest in other ways around will be fully protected. That's the warning signal given by the central government. Don't treat our minorities as an enemy. We are of the same family. Extremists are extremists. And smoggy weather, it's top of my head in China. And the government promised to do that. They declared a war against pollution as the war against poverty several decades ago. And people are doing more about the greener, lower carbon emission, and thinking about to put a price upon the resources and to keep a balance there over there. This is a debate here. Should we have carbon tax or resource tax? Many people say yes. But some people said, no, we need to learn cap and trading system to set up the exchanges. And some people said, let's have the dual track systems, okay? Put the tax at first, then by and by we will cultivate people to use the market mechanism to reduce the emissions and so on and so forth. And also we are forming a new view on food supply securities. And in next 10 years, a lot of inputs will be given to a cleaner soil, cleaner water, greener agriculture, and safe food. And we realize this is a very important areas. If we don't do that, it will be too late, and we can never realize stability nationwide. So the legitimacy of communist parties ruling in China relying upon what we can do here and how fast we can do that. And also there are debates upon the security of the GM foods, transfer of rural and farmers' land, and defarmation of farmers, while the reforms is carrying on. Debates on these issues might be very helpful in my eyes, improving the people's livelihoods and stimulating the balanced standards. If China can accept the GM foods in the future, if China can accept the leasehold lands in the rural areas and free the productivities of the farmers. And China is ready to addressing those problems. Though it's late, the concept of the civilization, eco-civilization, the green life is getting known by Chinese, but very challenging. I think it's vital for China to work together because you have the technology of the clean energy. Just due to you have rich shale gas and oil nowadays, a lot of technology of like gasification of coal has been stored for a long time. But in China, it's still very useful. So we can share the experience, improving the governance and building a market infrastructure for cleaner energy in the future. Look at this table. The emissions are very high, 4 times or 3 times of the US and the EU. That's the total national emissions. Smoke and dust, SO2s, and we list over there. China is becoming more transparent. This is all published. But I just do my homework to do the comparison with the US and the EU by and large. You can see almost 4 times or 3 times at least higher than your country and the EU. But it's starting to fall. And for emission of thermal power generation, that means the coal-fired power sector, which occupies the lion's share of the emissions. They are coming down. NOx is coming down as well. And we are set about all this, including the CO2. We got to fight against all these things. It's a clear cut for each regional, provincial level and ask them to give their targets, goals, time limits, and so on and so forth. Last week, Tianjin announced by year 2017, they will reduce all this by 25%. By year 2020, another 25%. And Beijing will follow the Tianjin example to do the same things. All the cars running in the streets in Tianjin before year 20, by the end of year 2017, must be reaching Euro 5 standards. Not a single car is allowed to run in the street without such a standard. And finally, I will mention 6 areas I think US and China can work together and do more investment due to the potential size and the depth of the market over there. The first thing is clean energy and technology. We are growing like this. Renewable electricity is 23%. China is determined to raise that ratio to 40% by year 2030. So this is a very bold planning. Nowadays, it's nuclear 2%, wind power is 2%, and solar is 1%. Biomaterials power generation is less than 0.5%. The rest are hydraulic ones. But in the future, it will be growing like this very quickly. And the second line is that we can work together for water, food, and beverage markets. It's huge markets. Every year, it's increased by 7%. So it's 6 billion. And this is the largest market worldwide. So long as we can fight against the fraudulent cases, so long as we can make sure that safety is with us, these are only 2 points. If you can reach these 2 points, people will consume at ease. So that is a big market. Third one is urban planning, design, construction, management. And China is like this. US is this. And by year 2020, China will be becoming 21%. US is also increased to 14 to 15%, and 15 to 21%. India is 5% and 7% here. Japan from 9 to 6. Canada is getting the same roughly. Okay, so it's a huge market. The fourth one is financial service and innovation. As I mentioned, we will have a lot of things, new things in that way. And your lessons and experiences will bring us a lot of benefits. The fifth line is the breakthrough in healthcare, nursing, and the population policy. This is the growth ratio of China, 23% every year. And the US is about 6%. So you can see this is a very potential market. The last one is media and entertainment. Every year, China increased by 50% in the size of the amounts, the money people spend for the box revenue. US plus Canada is 10.9 billion. And quickly, China is number 2. Last year is this one. And the last year is this one, and the year before last, that one. And Japan is almost no growth, 2.4 billion. Silently, China suddenly became number 2. Definitely, in next 5 years, China will be the largest market for media and entertainment industry, surpassing US plus Canada. Because every year it grows by 50%. There's so many people, and it's affordable. A few dozens Chinese bucks, you can spend 2 hours enjoy the cinema and theater performance over there. It's good for the young people, including me, the older people, old guy, sitting among the young people. So are 6 industries. I just list a few. Due to the pressed schedule, I just want to thank you for giving me the time to give you the brief situation and where we are and where we are heading for. To conclude, I use the saying that time and tide wait for no man. China got to be hurry up. And also hand in hand, I think China and US can change the whole world. Thank you.
First of all, Chairman Liu, that was an absolutely fascinating presentation. And I think it really showed us in numbers and in graphics, and I hope we might be able to talk you into letting us use some of this on our website as well, because I think these charts are fantastic and the bullet points are fantastic. Both the incredible success story of China and the incredible challenges that China is facing now. I think you made both of those very, very clear. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions, and I'll go to the audience very quickly. But my question would be, in broad historical terms, talk to us about the third plenum. A lot was decided there. You put up a lot of hugely important decisions. But in broad historical terms, where does this fit in Chinese history? Some people are saying that Xi Jinping is already becoming the most transformational leader since Deng Xiaoping, perhaps even more. Just what is your view on the third plenum and its importance in the broad sweep of Chinese history?
The new generation of the leaders in China convinced the people they can deliver something. Because there's no question mark about the Chinese government promised something. But for delivery something, the first time people are gathering the confidence after Deng Xiaoping's era, because when Xi Jinping, the chairman, took his place, he said, the first thing first, let's fight against corruption. Because the corruption will kill the whole party, kill the legitimacy of our ruling power, and also kill this civilized old history China. And he said, we got to do that, not only for 1 year, not only for 3 years, but it's for good. So we witnessed a huge campaign, so far very successful. And it deterred the cronyism development and deterred all the vested interest group that keep their mouths shut in face of the fully fledged reform. Because what I worried most at first when I heard the third plenum is that how we can deal with such a strong vested interest groups, okay? And but by and by, and he showed us examples, we can do something so long as we are very strong in enforcement. And so I think in the future economic reform, still he can do something, because he said, I will be the head of the 6 groups, including reform. So he's the number one to do the things. He got the guts. We used to work together in Fujian province. I knew him for quite a long, long time. He is a very quiet man, but very powerful in delivering what he said. So, moreover, we can never rely upon one person, right? So the party already decided this year we will be talking about the whole framework of rule of law in China and put everything within the boundary of the, legitimacy and of the legislature. So strengthen the rule of law So even if you have a very strong leadership, it won't be misled, and you can carry forward your ideas through to the end because you are protected by the law. If you are right, if you are wrong, then there's a boundary, and you can't beyond anything about that. So the rule of law and the very strong delivery and the implementation will guarantee the future of Chinese new roadmap. I think he recently mentioned a very good thing. The quotation of his saying is like this: 10% of promise, 90% of delivery.
10% of?
Promise.
Yes.
90% of delivery. He told his officials at Laos and Tiers in China.
Thank you for that answer. You showed the growth figures for China, and there's a great debate in Wall Street, from Wall Street to Shanghai, Hong Kong, all across the world about how much growth China requires. What is your answer to that question?
According to my census, and the government mentioned once again, 6.9% so far till year 2020. We can double our GDP. So speed is nothing. So long as you can reach 7%, that's okay. To double the income per capita, that will be a little bit tougher. You need a speed reaching 7.2% annually growth, starting from this year. So we set up the goal in 7.5%. But if you can reach 7.2%, we can realize the double goals we set several years ago. And by year 2020, we double the personal income, and we can double the GDP as well. But for double the GDP alone, you only need 6.9% annual growth rate. So don't worry about the speed, worry about the quality, worry about the changes. Let's watch all these changes and implementations. That's far more important than the speed.
Than the speed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To your area of expertise as a regulator, 3 of the 15 largest banks in the world are Chinese. By some measures, it's more than that. Massive potential, as your charts showed indirectly, for investment and growth. What do you think the primary issues are the banks face as they expand internationally? And then secondarily, what are the major challenges to reforming the Chinese banking and financial system?
I think the big challenges for them for time being is A, liquidity management. Facing the liberalization of interest rate, you got to learn how to manage your liquidity. It's an intraday position you got to maneuver on both sides, liability and asset. I don't think they are armed with adequate knowledge, skills, and experience in doing that. So they got to learn. They got to run and learn, okay? And the B is due diligence. Because nowadays it's you can see the speed is slowing down. When the tide they goes away, you will find that those who are swimming naked. So the non-performance loans will be rising, and the due diligence is very important to them. Know your customers. Know your customers' business is the key to success. So these 2 challenges are very important to Chinese banks, big or small, to survive and prosper. And also to the approaches how to reform. I think you've got to carry out the further reform, diversify the ownership, and take in the fresh blood, and learn more from your counterparties everywhere, the world over. And as we did several years ago, Chinese banks successfully introduced, the world-class banks as their strategic institutional investors to help them to streamline their operations and to put them floating on the capital market successfully. But that is very initial. We got to carry on.
One more, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. One more question for me, and then I'll turn to the audience. You talked about how growth, some people talk about how growth, a certain amount of growth is necessary for China to avoid social unrest. You talk about corruption, you talk about pollution. A question that General Cartwright, sitting in the front row, is familiar with at the Atlantic Council is one I love to ask on this podium. And that is, of all the things you're looking at in the global economy or at home in China, what keeps you up late at night?
I think in long run, China got to better its education and training. And China got to have more qualified schools, vocational schools in particular, to raise the people's skills and to broaden their visions, and so they are qualified to future jobs. And this is something very, very important. Second, you got to put the price right. We must let the market say more in the price mechanism, in terms of price mechanism. And thirdly, I think China got to, as we declare the war against the pollution, we must deliver that and let people see the concrete progress year by year. Then people will be confident and feel comfortable to work over there. And also we can attract more talents worldwide to help us to realize the China's dream.
Thank you for that answer. Questions, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Dong Hui Yu with China Review News Agency of Hong Kong. And yesterday, the first meeting of China National Security Committee was held in Beijing, and President Xi emphasized a lot on political, economic, and social security. So from your view, what are the critical things to ensure China's economic security in the process of opening market and economic reform? Do you think the mechanism has been put into place? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the first thing first is rule of law. And the second thing is that transparency. The third thing is democracy. And if you put everything under the sunlight, then automatically you will find out people will feel safe, okay? If anything wrong goes wrong, then automatically it will be caught by the public. Security issues, I think Chairman Xi is absolutely right because he took a broad vision, not a narrow security issues like national defense or something like that. He's talking about the whole security issue story. We need a broad vision. Then underneath, we need a building block approach. So many blocks, and block by block, you got to identify the gaps where we are. And thirdly, I think it's a huge topic, and this is a big country. So the sequence is very important. Which goes first, which goes second. Don't put cart before the horse, otherwise you can never get better outcomes. So talking about the security issues broadly, I think these are three principles we got to follow. Fortunately, the China leaders realized that. So they said, we got to get our vision right at first. And also, the rule of law is very important. Otherwise, you will be misled and get lost by the end of the day. So, and always put the Chinese as a nation among the global family. We need a cordial relationship. We need a partnership much better than before. This is the whole environment, and you got to move in line with best practice internationally for the security protections.
On a specific issue that's up now in terms of cordial partnership and the world role, how has the issue of Ukraine reverberated in China, and how do the Chinese look at this issue?
I think Mr. Xi made it very clear. He said that we never rock the boat. You know, we don't make these problems the worldwide. Whenever and wherever, we can never be a troublemaker. Okay, we don't touch any things like that. But in the meantime, we're not afraid of troubles caused by someone. To solve the problems, we will seek peaceful ways, always, as always, because we need time to do our home job. Our homework is abundant, so we need peace. We need the whole environment to protect us.
Thank you, please. Thank you.
Robert Charetta, President of International Investor. Thanks to the Atlantic Council, and thank you very much for your presentation in English.
Thank you.
It's much appreciated. There's been much speculation about the foreign exchange reserves that are in excess, estimated exceeding $4 trillion. Where are they? How are they used? And how confident are you that they're being used wisely?
Unfortunately, most of our foreign exchange reserves are borrowing in the treasuries here. They are, not all, but still it's a lion's share. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it's more than half treasury. So we're very sensitive to the issues in the future. They're looking for the Bloomberg every day to see the UST10 is moving up and down the year.
When you say unfortunately because you could invest them more profitably elsewhere?
Now, for foreign exchange reserve, the first principle first is safety. Still, we think the US dollar's assets in long run, judged by the liquidity, availability, accessibility, and the cost of funding. A lot of things. You measure all this fully fledged story, automatically you will tell yourself where you are going. So still, we are stick to that. Of course, having said that, we're very cautious and carefully to diversify our risks. We will never put eggs into one basket. But for the time being, I'm sorry to say we haven't got a lot of options.
So half in U.S., and where is the rest in general terms?
I think a little bit EU, Euro, or somewhere else. It's I'm not in the foreign exchange bureau guys. I haven't been working for them for quite a long time. But anyway, it's diversified. But with most of them are investing in U.S. assets.
Thank you.
It's a portfolio.
Yeah, in the back. In the back, I saw you. I'm trying to get to you roughly in the direction I've seen everybody. And we only really have a few more minutes, so I'm sorry, I probably won't get to everyone. Thank you.
My name is Pratik, and I'm a student at Dickinson College. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned earlier quantitative easing in the United States and its effect on emerging markets. And I wanted to know what you thought were opportunities for central banks in Europe and America to cooperate with central banks in emerging markets, and what that key catalyst would be for these central banks to cooperate, and what areas of cooperation you foresee. I understand that these banks have domestic mandates, but how can they incorporate thinking about emerging markets into their planning? and what are the areas for growth and cooperation? Thank you.
This is a very interesting question because on the one hand, we witness a huge progress in global cooperations since the financial crisis, the global financial crisis. Thanks to the efforts of the G20, FSB, and the BCBS in Basel, and we had such a mechanism to exchange the data among the central bankers and among the regulators. And fortunately, we can see the efficiency of changing the data and changing the information much better than the old days practice. I got sufferings when I talked with the Fed and the OCC here in year 2008 regarding small banks in California. And I kept asking questions to them, but no answers. Finally, I got the answers from Sheila Bair from FDIC, thanks to her efforts. But nowadays it's different. We have a more effective, efficient exchange mechanism directly with the Fed, OCC, and FDIC. And on the other hand, I'm sorry to say that, such a cooperations, is just happened when the sun is shining. When it's going to rain, maybe something happened very slowly. So this is something we got to improve and consolidate that. And for the time being, we have two mechanisms. It's a peer review, and the supervisory college is the other. And they are effective to certain degrees, but they have a lot of restriction limitations. And the supervisory college means that the host and the home countries will exchange the informations in between. And the peer reviews that you will do the reviews occasionally and on a regular basis, and to judge how the individual countries to maneuver in line with the Basel III or Solvency II, and how they are using their national discretions, and if it's appropriate or not. But all these reviews and the mechanism, in my eyes, are still behind the curve in general, I'm sorry to say.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take two last questions, and we'll make them very brief questions, brief answers. I know you had a hand up from the, and the gentleman there about 3 rows back. Sorry, the first here to the left, and then, yeah, please.
Thank you, Professor, for being with us. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of Emerald Planet TV, and we've featured China now 8 times on the best practices in the environment, which is the other side of what you're reporting up there. But there are a number of initiatives that are going on at the local and regional level of China. So how do we identify more of those best practices so they're not only just examples for the world, but can be used by other communities within China itself, which may or may not know about such best practices, how to improve the soil, air, and water quality of their local areas?
And let me pick up one last question. I think part of what lies in that question is, can China leapfrog in terms of technology because of its issues, where it really becomes a world leader, already has become in any of these areas, please. And I apologize to those I didn't get to.
Thank you. My name is Lorenzo Giorgiani. I work for Tudor Investment Corporation. I have a question for you. Do you assess? Do you share the view that the Chinese economy has a significant debt overhang problem, meaning that there's been excessive credit that has gone to investments that have become over time less productive? And if so, what should be the regulatory response to this problem. And typically, if one tries to deleverage quickly, you have shock therapy that helps you sort of rebound, but it's bad for growth in the near term. But if you do it too slowly, you might never get to the problem. It gets amplified over time. How do you think the government and the regulatory framework will deal with this problem going forward? Thank you.
To answer the first question, I think, it's China's government to do its own homework. You've got to build the hierarchy and to make sure the implementation can get to the grassroots. It's not very difficult for China to do that because China is the central economy and it's very powerful. If they are determined to do that, they can realize that it can reach into every corner of the country very quickly. So the enforcement is very important. So that is the key. And in the meantime, on the international level, I think the platform like SNAE dialogue, strategic and economic dialogue we had between China and US, if I could suggest, it will get to the concrete and the down-to-earth way. It's not that it's just superficial on very high-ranking officials talking, but we got to design a mechanism and a framework how we can bring the enforcement productive and to carry out all these implementations. And the second, to answer your question is, could you brief me a little bit?
Debt overhang problem. Does China have a debt
Yeah.
overhang problem?
Yes.
How should the regulator respond?
Right. This is a key important because without the reliable data, again, you can't make any decisions. And this is the key issue we want to overcome. And China has got marvelous achievements and progress in that areas by learning from international best practices like SDD systems in calculating everything. But still, I think if you want to improve further in China, we must make sure that, the people got to tell the truth. This is a cultural cultivation. If you tell lie, you got to be reliable and accountable for what you do in the market, because the cheating is the forgery case, okay? It must be ruled by the law. And this is the first thing first. So what I suggest is coming from the government, the behavior. We must tell truth, okay, all the time to the public. And then make sure that the transparency system and that make sure that let the older market pay some rules to nourish their data. Nowadays, we have mobile internet, we have big data systems, and we have cloud. So combine all these things and make the market to do those businesses instead of the government to do that. Will be much better system. So I think China is seriously thinking about all this. If they don't think about that, they will be driven by the market. We have private sector doing like Tencent. They have accounts of more than 600 million nowadays. And we have WeChat system and the Weibo system. So it's easy for us to set up a PPP system, okay, private and public partnership, to do better in that way. Otherwise, you can't get the reliable data by only from the channel of the government or from the market. So we must have a PPP system in that area to make sure that this is urgent task for us to get the reliable data and in good time. But I'm very confident that higher technologies, including the mobile internet and the big data and the cloud, will push us to move much faster.
Thank you, Chairman Liu. Let me just say in closing, we at the Atlantic Council have been doing work on China and China-U.S. relations for a long time. But we've been stepping up some of our work, particularly on cooperative issues in the Brent Scowcroft Center for International Security. As you know, General Scowcroft is a long-time, deep friend of the U.S.-Chinese relationship. And as Ambassador Bloch says, I want to thank her again for her introductory remarks. This is perhaps the key, if you're looking out to 2030, 2040, of how successfully we'll have managed this new world. Recently, the Council launched a report with the China Institute for International Studies. I'm very glad to see that represented here, and it was called China-U.S. Cooperation, Key to the Global Future. And it was supported by the China-United States Exchange Foundation and C.H. Tung. It was under the leadership of Brent Scowcroft, Steve Hadley, C.H. Tung, and Li Zhaojing. And it emphasized the need for China and the U.S. to demonstrate the necessity of cooperation between the two countries on global issues to their respective peoples. And I won't go into the details of the report, but our idea was not just to do the report. Our idea was also to have these sorts of sessions at this sort of level where we can discuss issues that are of huge global concern and of huge bilateral interest. So Chairman Liu, thank you so much for taking your time. It was a wonderful, wonderful presentation, excellent exchange with the audience.
Thank you, Mr. Kemp. And could I say one word that from bottom of my heart, I got to show my gratitude to the excellent job done by this council. For so many years, you have done a marvelous job to strengthen the ties between these two countries. I think if we can reduce the misunderstanding between these two countries, nothing is impossible. We can do more for both of us, and we can do more for the whole world. So thank you very much once again. Thank you.